like to welcome you all out to our Southern Region RAC. Today is September 3rd, 2024. We will go ahead and start our RAC by introducing our RAC members. We'll start from left to right with those of us that are here in person, and then we will go to those that are joining online. We'll go online with Chad, Bart, Mike, and Brooklyn in that order. So start at this end.
Brian Johnson, I'm from Monroe, public at large.
Tammy Pearson, elected official.
Berlin King, representing agriculture, Signal, Utah.
Rachel Bullis, I'm non-consumptive rep from Cedar.
I'm Riley Roberts, representing Sportsman. I failed to mention that I am filling in for Austin tonight as chair. We will definitely not make this a tradition.
Chuck Chamberlain, Forest Service, City.
Russ Gardner, Farm Bureau, Utah.
Chad?
Chad Utley, public at large, St. George.
Bart?
Bart Batista, non-consumptive rep, Kanab, Utah.
Mike?
Mike Grant, sportsman, Annabella, Utah.
And Brooklyn?
Brooklyn Cox, BLM Supervisory Natural Resource Specialist.
Thank you. We'd also like to recognize a couple of our wildlife board members joining us online. Gary and Paula. Paula would be here. She's listening in as her husband's stalking in on now as we speak right now. Just to go over our RAC procedures, I don't have the preamble with me, so please remember this is a public meeting, so please stay civil. If you have comments, you do need to fill out one of the green comment cards and bring it up. And please make sure you have the agenda number that you want to make those comments on. And we will make sure that we recognize you. There are mics and cameras all over, so you're able to stand tonight wherever you're at. The mics do pick up on any sound, so please keep any side conversations to a minimum if you will do that for us.
And be aware that any side conversations will be heard over YouTube. So.
All right. We will start. Our first action item is just the approval of the agenda and the minutes. Hopefully, all of the RAC members were able to look at those. Entertain a motion
Motion to approve.
All right. Motion from Tammy.
Second.
Second from Berlin. All in favor? Let's start.
Yes.
All right, everybody here, we'll do it by raise hand, just a yay, and then we'll do it. All right, online?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect, unanimous, thank you. All right. And I got the approval of the agenda. All right. Wildlife Board meeting update.
Need approval of the minutes and the agenda. That for both of them?
That was for both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That was for both. You got that right.
Yes. Let me just. So the most recent wildlife round of RAC meetings was canceled because we didn't have anything on the agenda that needed to go out to the public. There was an abbreviated board meeting that does have some pertinence to the southern region. Mike, what's his last name? With the CWU on the beaver.
Labrum.
Mike Labrum made an appeal to the board to see if he could get their CWMU approved for elk. It's already a deer CWMU. It was kind of the last part of the appeals process, and were they very formal, both sides represented by attorneys, and the board had an attorney there to advise them. After a lot of discussion and hearing the different sides, the board ultimately decided to stay with their original decision to not allow that to be an elk CWMU. The kicker there is, according to the regulations, it's 10,000 acres is required to have an elk CWMU. There are some that are less, but they're usually on the $7,000 to $8,000 to $9,000 range. His CWMU, although fantastic habitat, is just barely over 5,000 acres, and so the board just didn't feel comfortable granting the exception there. So that was it for the board meeting.
All right. I guess you're the next one as well, so we'll give you a minute Adam, for the regional update.
Okay, Adam, if you pull up the presentation.
Sure why that's not sharing full.
We have a way to put it in presenter mode.
I'm just trying to make this full screen for some reason. Try a different way. We're getting there. Just not sure. Full screen.
So Paula just gave it an update. It's even better. It's not her husband that has the tag, it's her daughter.
Oh,
that
nice.
they're stalking on.
Nice.
So. We can do it like that, Adam, if you'll.
Okay, sorry it's a little small. I'm not sure why it's.
I think I'll be able to read it at that size. I was a little worried before. So with the wildlife section, when we passed the sheep management plan for the Mineral Mountains, we made a commitment to kind of the local ag industry that we would make sure that any sheep that left that range and went outside of certain parameters, that they would be removed. And we've had to do that several times, and we had to do it with 2 rams just within the last couple of weeks. We had 2 rams that wandered off the mineral range. They're just getting started into their breeding season, and so it's a typical time for young rams to go on walkabouts. Unfortunately, these 2 went too far, kind of crossed lines where we were worried about them coming back and infecting the herd if they had any contact with domestics, and so they were euthanized over on the Cricket Mountains, north and west of Milford. Our Zion bighorn sheep continue to display coughing, but we haven't had widespread mortalities there. These pneumonia events in bighorn sheep can be very mild to very highly virulent and cause a lot of mortalities. Luckily, we're hoping that we're on the lighter side with those Zion sheep. And then they completed preseason elk and pronghorn classifications, and things look good for both of those species. Next slide. We'll be doing chronic wasting disease sampling in the southern region this year on the Fish Lake, the Thousand Lakes, the Boulder, Monroe, Mountain Dutton, and Pine Valley units. We will be sending a letter out to everybody that has a tag on those units, trying to increase our sampling. We're seeing chronic wasting disease making large movements. Recently, we've been somewhat buffered from it in the southern region so far, but it jumped Utah and went from Colorado to Nevada this year. So if it can do that, certainly we're at risk here in the southwestern part of Utah as well. So any way you can help get the word out to increase surveillance. Our best tool is knowing where it's at. and when it gets there, to best protect our mule deer herds. Next slide. Good water years mean good years for upland game. I just overheard a conversation here in the audience talking about forest grouse, people seeing really good populations of forest grouse. That season opened on Sunday, right, Gabe, or on September 1st?
Open Monday.
Open Monday, so just yesterday. In addition to that, we've got the youth chucker hunt September 21st and through the 23rd, and then the general chucker hunt opening September 28th. Those populations are rebounding, as are Gamble's quail down in Washington County. The statewide youth pheasant hunt will be October 26th through the 31st, and the general pheasant hunt will be November 2nd. We will be putting birds out in the normal locations, and all that information is available on our website for anybody that wants to know when and where pheasants will be released. Next slide. Prairie dogs are a big deal this year because we've got a lot of them in lots of places. Over 2,400 prairie dogs are trapped and moved. That's for public safety, agriculture, lots of different reasons why we're moving them off of private land out onto public land. They trapped just an idea of condition and how good things are for prairie dogs. They caught the heaviest prairie dog they've ever seen, which was over 4 pounds. And you think of a 4-pound fish as a big fish, and a prairie dog that's that big is a monster. So highest spring counts ever recorded, over 13,000 earlier this spring. And we've had, part of what that brings is, when we have high populations, we provide a lot of opportunity for lethal take with agriculture, and they've been taking advantage of that with over 2,000 prairie dogs that have been taken on control permits by the agricultural community, which is
So
good.
Kevin, before you move
Yeah.
on, to clarify that, in order to get them delisted, if they have to have the counts on federal land, or does your public land, the Sitla count?
Public land was Sitla counts it, and that, frankly, that count of 1,000 on each thing, that's a recommendation, not a rule. We're moving forward with a request for delisting just because we've got the data to show that they're no longer in danger. The threshold is threatened or endangered with extinction. If we can demonstrate that they're not threatened or endangered with extinction, it really doesn't matter what the recovery plan says. And so we're moving forward.
So do you track them at all, like do you do like the GPS collars or ear tags or anything?
No, we do. We have put some telemetry tracking and whatnot. We don't have the technology. It's too heavy, and with it being underground, it's hard to track.
Did you end up dumping some in Beaver County then? Did you take some?
We've put in the site out on Indian Peaks on our WMA. I don't know if they've released any out there yet. So, let's go on to the next slide. Any other? Feel free to ask questions as we go through.
On that chronic wasting, what's the theory on it jumping that far?
Probably someone that harvested an animal in an infected state and brought the carcass back.
And then dumped it somewhere?
And dumped it somewhere. That's the most plausible, unless there's a mechanism that we're not aware of. But
Can it be transmitted with birds or?
not that there's any evidence of it. It's really tied to their the neurological system, brain stem and those types of brain matter and brain stem.
So Kevin, what part of Nevada? Do we know?
I don't know. I've been told, but I don't remember.
And what part of Colorado?
It's all over Colorado.
Everywhere? I got a
And
kid out there
Wyoming.
hunting deer and you tell me the damn thing.
And all along our eastern border, all of our units that border Wyoming or Colorado have chronic wasting. So we've been doing. It's been a big year for doing bat surveys. Again, this is proactive for when we get. Part of which is, so we have the data when we get petitions for species to be listed, and bats are high on a lot of people's radar screens. We get high return on investment on this kind of work because we get those we're able to provide the Fish and Wildlife Service with the data to show that our populations are secure. And so it's been one of those, about every 3 years, we rotate through the different species with small mammals. And then, so we had a bat night up at Mammoth Cave. It was kind of an outreach event, was very popular. We filled up all of the available seats and had 100 people on the waiting list. Next slide. Our aquatic section, there have been some summer fish kills. They're really caused by water temperatures, which creates low oxygen. There's a lot of guys there on the back row that can fill in the blanks on that a lot better than I can, but we've had reports at Panguitch Lake. It was mostly yearling chubs. Paiute Reservoir, 1 to 200 trout, and Otter Creek Reservoir, we had a handful of trout that we had died because of low oxygen levels up in the shallows. Mike, anything you want to clarify on that since you're here?
Just those kind of numbers are pretty minimal. Most of the fish are staying in deep water where it's colder, more oxygen, so they're okay.
Okay. Boulder Mountain, if you haven't fished the Boulder Mountain, you need to. You can see that tiger trout in the picture there on the right. That's maybe not common, but not uncommon on the Boulder Mountain. We did have some of our shallow lakes experience winter kill in years in the past, but we've had better survival the last couple of years because we've had deeper water in those lakes going into the winter. Next slide. Our Washington County field office is always extremely busy. Bluefin is a small minnow. It's one of the endangered fishes in the Virgin River drainage, and really moving conservation forward with that fish with some good things that have happened over the last few months. Smallmouth bass are a problem because they're able to survive in the streams down there and a real threat. So we do a lot of work to try to remove smallmouth bass and encourage largemouth bass in Washington County. And then the Santa Clara River also is doing really well, high native fish counts this past year. Desert tortoise, a lot of focus on desert tortoise right now with the Northern Corridor project going through Washington County. Populations are doing well, and some efforts with some young ones that were recently translocated. Most productive year we've ever had with willow flycatchers, which is another endangered or threatened species down along the Virgin River. Western toad, again, another species of conservation status that we did the largest release out of our captive breeding since 2019. So again, these are all efforts to make sure that we have secure populations and are avoiding endangered species listings on any of these species, even down to like freshwater mussels. And I'm not sure what a winged floater is, but they found some in a survey on Otter Creek. So. I'll show you a video with habitat here in just a minute with some recent work down at Bicknell Bottoms. So we'll skip that one for now. Oh, I was going to mention our WRI projects on BLM land were kind of held up for the last few months because we were waiting for a contract to be signed in BLM. That has been signed, and all of those funds have been released, so the projects are moving forward again on BLM lands. They've been on hold for about, well, since July 1st. So our outreach section, lots of work with dedicated hunters as guys are getting ready for the archery hunt. That continues as we'll go through the beginning of the muzzleloader hunt, the rifle hunts. We did have a mountain goat viewing event scheduled up on the Tusher Mountain, but it had to be canceled because the Forest Service is not going to open the roads because of the fire that happened there, the Silver King fire. Those roads are going to remain closed. They told us they don't have any plans to open them this season.
They've had too much flooding.
Yeah, Chuck, anything to add to that? Or
no, they're just trying to protect the resource right now.
Kevin,
yeah,
with that in mind, if those roads aren't opened and access is limited, is there any recourse for those who have tags on those goats?
Not
You gotta
typically.
come through these.
There's there's access, but you're gonna have to do it by horse or foot. And we, that's that's why it's hunting and not killing. Sometimes it's harder than other years, so. Again, the Mammoth Cave, the Bat Night, was very successful, and then we have some other upcoming events. We have a women's 22 rifle clinic at the Purgatory Range down in Washington County, and a shotgun clinic upcoming, and then the Kokanee Salmon viewing event. If you haven't been up to Fish Lake when the Kokanee are running up Twin Creeks, you need to. There's the Forest Service has put a really nice boardwalk that goes right along the river there, and it's there when they're coming up, and they're all colored up. It's pretty spectacular and pretty neat to see. So, next slide, law enforcement. So we have 2 new officers that are kind of have their training wheels taken off and are working on their own now in West Washington and East Iron counties. We'll have a new officer coming into Kane County that'll start at the end of this month. It'll be in training for a couple of months and then kind of hit the ground sometime around the first part or end of November, first part of December. We do still have vacancies in Garfield, Beaver, and the Salina districts. And then Josh Carver, that's shown there, is one of our canine officers. He's, I think he's on his 4th dog. Sam was retired, and Rooster is his new dog that's, again, doing really well. So that's all I have. Let me show you a couple of set up these videos. We've shown you this stuff in the past. One of the things that came out of our planning effort with Bicknell Bottoms was an agreement to try to increase water flow in the channels through there. And so we've been doing work on that the last couple of years. And seems to be working. It'll be an ongoing process. That it's a pretty dynamic system. And as we get big flows through there, sometimes the channel changes where it wants to flow, and we're trying to keep up with that. But go ahead and show these videos. So we were able to get an airboat in there last week to continue that work, and Gary sent a couple of videos that show that. This next video is off the front. You'll see the green part of the airboat. At the bottom of the next video, as he goes up through the channels. So as you see, we did a lot of that work with herbicide and with a machine called a Marsh Master over the last couple of years. And like I said, it will be a continuing effort, but that seems to be helping right now. Verlin, that's right in your front yard. Anything you want to add on what's been happening at Bicknell Bottoms?
That's pretty misrepresentative of what's going on because of that.
Not purposely, but go
Not
ahead and share your
purposely,
thoughts.
but that's it's a lake now. It wasn't till, last week, NRCS came in there and measured the water, and they told Tory that there wasn't enough water leaving after that flood that come down Government Creek. It dammed off the river and backed that up. So all that, even though you see how muddy it is. Normally it's not that muddy, and so it's back Bicknell Bottoms and raised it probably a foot.
And we were aware of that. And so we're in that kind of critical period right now. So right after a flood happens, there are opportunities to go in and mitigate and remove some of that. We've talked to the county about that.
The Tory Irrigation Company hired Jackson's Excavating to go in and dig that trash out. So it's slowly dropping the bottoms back to where it used to.
And I agree with that right now there's some, but I think having those channels created, once they get that kind of plug released, it does allow that water to move through there more efficiently than it has been in the past. So anyway, that's the end of the update. Unless there's questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, all right, thank you, Kevin. All right, we'll move on to agenda number 5. This one is also informational. Turn a moment over to Alan Ward.
That one's,
Do we need to do
that one might be Central Region specific. Is that, Craig, is Alan planning on being here? Do you want to address anything on the Strawberry Reservoir?
He should be here, but if he's not, we can handle it.
You want to go ahead and just give any additional information on that?
Sure. So we had an illegal introduction of walleye into Strawberry Reservoir. Oh gosh, it was a while ago, this past winter. It was detected via ice fishing. An individual provided a video that was sent to us, and we were amazed that walleye had actually shown up in Strawberry, but not amazed that another illegal introduction had appeared in the state of Utah. Right now, we are undertaking an intensive monitoring effort to verify the presence of walleye and the possible expansion of walleye in Strawberry Reservoir. If we do detect additional walleye in the reservoir, we have a game plan in place to address that via various different tools, everything from mechanical removal to awards to other things. It seems odd to say this, but it was actually a beneficial thing from an overall illegal movement of fish standpoint to have Strawberry be potentially stricken with an illegally introduced fish. Reason why is because of the value of that reservoir from a fishing standpoint. With it being a very valuable reservoir, it really presses the point and forces us into the mindset of coming up with an overall illegal fish movement strategy moving forward and hopefully protect not only Strawberry but other waters in the state.
Any questions? I guess that's your question.
any questions from the RAC?
Where are they in Utah?
We've got them in several locations. Willow Bay is one of the primary locations. Starvation Reservoir is another. We also have sterile populations that we're reestablishing in northeastern Utah as well.
You want to comment on where we have walleye in the southern region, Mike?
Yeah, in the southern region, they're limited to Lake Powell and then a couple reservoirs in Delta, DMAD and Gunnison Bend and Lower Severe River.
This one, Craig, what would happen if we did get a bunch of walleye in Strawberry? What do you envision for the reservoir? I mean, what would that do?
We're in the process right now of meeting with Wes Pierce, Alan, Chris Crockett, who's the regional manager in the central region, myself, and Trina Hedrick, along with our researchers at our Animal Health Research Center, to come up with kind of a cohesive game plan that has triggers built into it. So kind of an if this, then that response program or prescription. Right now, we believe that we have the space and time to develop that and have it be comprehensive based upon what we've seen as far as walleye expansion in other reservoirs like Echo. We probably have on the order of 3 to 5 years to come up with that game plan and be able to effectively address walleye if they do establish.
Craig, I know that you guys have been really proactive on this. I remember in the presentation, there was an algorithm in regards to the number of walleye that should be caught just by anglers throughout. I think it was within a 12-month period of time, if I remember right. So if that hasn't been established, then come December, January, then we just kind of move forward as is. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, if we don't detect any further walleye, we're going to give it probably 2 to 3 years of intensive effort to verify the presence of walleye in the system. If we don't, then we'll probably back off of those. At the same time, we are going to be meeting, as I mentioned, and coming up with a suite of options. If we hit certain trigger points, those trigger points are going to indicate either the presence of additional adult walleye, which would mean that we'd move in one direction from a response, probably going into a netting mode. If we were to say detect the recruitment of walleye in the system, natural reproduction, that sends us into a different mode. So it depends on what size of walleye we detect, how many we detect, and whether there is evidence of recruitment.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, while we have you there, we'll move on to item number 6.
Any questions from the audience?
Any questions? Sorry. All right.
I will summarize. This was on the online presentation. We did have 3 people from the southern region that watched it and mostly in favor of what was presented there.
Thank you. We will turn a couple minutes over to you, Craig, as well on this next agenda item, which is an action agenda item. Those of you that did come in, if you do have comment cards, you want to bring those up. I know that I've got several here, but if there are other comments from the public, if you want to bring those cards up, you will need to have those if you want to make a comment. But in the meantime, go ahead, Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to you and council members. Prior to fielding questions from the audience and the council tonight, I wanted to provide you an overview of the process that we at DWR Aquatics undertake when developing regulation proposals like those being presented this year. Regulations are a critical tool used by DWR as part of our adaptive fisheries management approach. We propose regulations that are intended to help us achieve statewide and water body specific management objectives in the face of what we view as an increasing management challenge. Additionally, regulations aid us as we work to maintain satisfaction among a diverse angling public. Regions typically begin developing regulation proposals years in advance, beginning with the collection of fish populations and angling data. Usually, catch rate, length, weight, and age data are collected from a subsample of the fish population using netting and electrofishing, while data related to angler pressure, catch, and harvest are collected via creel survey. Managers then evaluate these data, assessing whether fish populations are meeting species-specific population management objectives for a particular water body. Results from this fish population and creel surveys are usually presented to anglers during management teams or informal stakeholder meetings, where angler feedback is gathered to aid us in the development of regulation proposals. Once developed, proposed regulations are put forward for assessment of public support via a survey emailed to over 25,000 licensed anglers. In an attempt to ensure that these surveys provide an unbiased assessment of regulation proposals from an angling community, we distribute the surveys to randomly selected license holders and distribute the survey to various groups within that sampling pool, proportional to their representation among all licensed anglers in Utah. For example, 15% of licensed anglers in Utah are female, and 15% of the 25,000 potential respondents contacted were also female. With over 400,000 resident anglers, the vast majority of anglers will not be surveyed in a single year's random representative sample of only 25,000 anglers. However, our survey methods adhere to the scientific standards for public surveys, and we therefore believe in the validity of them. Before I close tonight, I want to speak specifically to the regulation changes proposed at Flaming Gorge Reservoir. The overarching reason for all fisheries management actions, including those with the use of regulations, is to provide Utah anglers with the most satisfying fishing experience possible. Our effort to establish greater consistency across state lines, Flaming Gorge is designed to do just that. Our belief is that consistency in regulation of state boundaries will minimize confusion and limit the likelihood of angler populations at Flaming Gorge. I'm not sure where that feedback is coming from. I apologize, folks. The Flaming Gorge regulation changes proposed for 2025 are the culmination of nearly 8 years of negotiation and collaborative efforts between Wyoming Game and Fish and DWR. In closing, with nearly 4,000 respondents responses from all of our varied angler interests, we're confident that the depiction of public sentiment presented regarding the 2025 regulations is accurate and unbiased and showcases overall public support for our regulatory proposal package. We hope the entire suite of proposed changes will meet with your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate that. And my fellow RAC members that are online, I'm gonna have Kevin help me. Sometimes I forget. So if you have any questions, please just go ahead and raise your hand there. We'll open it up at this time for questions from the RAC. No questions? Chad?
Right, so I want to make sure I'm on the right agenda item. My agenda was a little different. Are we talking about a proposal on all the proposed changes or just Flaming Gorge?
All of them.
All of them. I just wanted to highlight Flaming Gorge nested within that.
So we'd received a few comments, at least in my email, about the proposed changes to Manning Meadow Reservoir and Barney Lake, changing those from artificial fly and lure only. Well, changing one to artificial fly and lure only. Striking both of them as artificial fly and lure only. And I just wanted to know a little bit more about the process on that. It seems, the question is, how many artificial fly and lure only bodies of water do we have in southern Utah?
Mike, let's have you address those questions that are specific here to the region, if you would, please.
I'll come up here so nobody has to turn around. I'm Mike Hadley, Southern Region Aquatics Program Manager for the Division of Wildlife. So in Southern Utah, artificial fly and lure only water bodies, I have to let me count them off the top of my head. Minersville, Kolob for a portion of the year, Doherty Basin Lake, and I think Manning Meadow and Barney would be the others. So that's the answer to that question.
And I had one more question, and Mike, you're probably the guy to answer this too. When was the last time a artificial fly and lure only body of water was proposed to be established in southern Utah?
I would say that would predate my time, so.
It would have been the Kolob management plan, I think.
Kolob was in the early 90s. It was probably during the 90s.
And correct me if I'm right, Kolob was artificial fly and lure only all year. And that management plan changed it from artificial fly and lure only to bait fishing from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Is that correct?
That is correct. So it is a seasonal bait restriction.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
And we do have a few streams that also have artificial flies and lures only. The East Fork of the Sevier River in Black Canyon and Mammoth Creek.
Appreciate it.
Mammoth Creek as well. Thank you.
I don't think Minersville's been that far back.
From what I remember I think it was the early 90s, early to
Was it
mid
the
90s. Yes.
And if I'm correct, I don't want to assume, and I don't know, probably you might, thank you. The biggest reason for that is just because the fishing, Manning and Barney are thriving.
Yes.
Correct, that's the biggest reason for the change, give more opportunity.
Yes, we've been monitoring Manning Meadow Reservoir very closely for over 30 years. It is the reservoir where we hold our brood population of Bonneville cutthroat trout for southern Utah. So every year we net that lake and collect cutthroat trout and spawn them. So we've been monitoring these fish yearly for over 30 years, watching them very closely. And the numbers, the abundance of fish in that reservoir is very high. We also did we conducted an angler survey in 2022 that allowed us to assess the use of that water body and found that it still doesn't get a lot of use, and especially harvest is very low. With the current regulations, we feel like there's an opportunity for more of our angling public to be able to utilize those fish and gain some appreciation for them.
And there's no concern, at least over the next, I don't know how far out the projections go, of over harvest.
So we, like as mentioned, we monitor it very regularly. We can respond to very quickly to any kind of, drop in numbers. I don't anticipate that we would see that, but we can respond very quickly. The number of fish that we stock in that reservoir to maintain it is relatively small for most of our water bodies. So we could easily, increase stocking if necessary to address any over harvest that we might see, but I think it would take a lot more harvest than we have now to even get to that.
And then when you say you can respond fairly quickly, I know a lot of stuff that we do on the RAC, especially with our big game, it's there's management plans and it's a longer process. Are we talking year to year?
Yeah, so responding quickly means stocking rates.
Okay.
Because so each year we can determine how many fish we need to stock in that reservoir because we're collecting eggs directly from it. So we can collect more eggs if we need them, and then by the following fall, we have those fish readily available to stock back in the reservoir.
So Mike, talk through that's the change from the biological side. You can increase stocking. If you wanted to make a regulation change, it's a little bit longer process. Maybe walk through that.
Correct. So if currently the way our system is set up for fishing regulations is we review those every 2 years during odd years. Well, odd years is when we look to implement changes. So it would be, 2027 would be the next potential change, or 2029 after that.
Right, thank you.
Is the same true with Barney as Manning, where you're saying you've got plenty of fish, or does it winter kill?
So Barney Lake, let's go back to, first of all, the reason that it also has special regulations. Originally, the intent was because they're so close together, from a law enforcement perspective, it made a lot more sense to have them have similar regulations so that there wasn't bait fishing at the next closest lake when they're they're not close to any other lakes on Monroe Mountain. So the reason that Barney Lake has those regulations was to match more Manning Meadow. So the reason that we're proposing removing those regulations is to do the same thing, to help law enforcement maintain that. We also feel like the population in Barney Lake can handle that. Now, we have seen some winter kill a little bit in Barney Lake. That was really due to severe drought conditions in recent years. The other philosophy, though, is if we do get regular winter kill, that actually makes it less responsible to have special regulations where we build up a stockpile of large fish that can then be lost to winter kill instead of allowing the angling public to utilize those.
I have some follow-up question.
Go ahead, Chad. I think Mike's
So,
got a
yes, sorry, Mike. You indicated that you've done some angler surveys. Is there any way in your angler surveys to target the anglers who are fishing with artificial flies and lures only?
Yes, Chad. So actually the angler survey was done on site at Manning Meadow Reservoir. So we only interviewed anglers who were fishing there. So it targeted almost all the people that we interviewed during that survey were fishing with artificial flies and lures only. There were only 5 that were from one group that were fishing with bait illegally.
And my follow-up question with that is, would you say that anglers who fish artificial flies traditionally are looking to fish for wild trout that have been in the reservoir for a while versus stock trout?
So all the trout in Manning Meadow Reservoir are stocked. They don't, the tributary in Manning Meadow is not big enough for them to maintain a wild population. There may be a handful of fish that might be wild, but I would say it'd be a negligible amount that don't contribute anything to the population.
All right, so would you be, when you stock them, would you be changing the size of the stocked fish?
No, they are stocked at 2 inches in the fall.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chad.
Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, most of them got answered, and I hope you guys can hear me well. Most of my questions got answered. Just a couple more to follow up with. The benefit to changing that to taking artificial flies and lures off. Are we hoping to get larger fish in there? Obviously there'll be more opportunity. So is there a larger quantity of fish or a larger size of fish that we're going to change it to so people have more opportunity of big fish?
So that would be one of the hopes that, so first of all, I think really our number one priority there is allowing more use and opportunity for anglers from an abundant resource. But then one of the side benefits of that is if we reduce density, there could be improved growth. And we would hope to see a larger maximum size. As of right now, we don't see fish over about 16, 17 inches in length in Manning Meadow. So yes, if there was increased harvest, we could see improved growth and larger average size.
Okay, and my other question is, and forgive me if I'm unclear on this. You know, a couple of the other streams you talked about, East Fork Severe, that's artificial flies and lures only. Those are blue ribbon fisheries. Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Yes, they are.
So they're targeted for larger fish that can be caught with artificial flies and lures only. Is that going to affect these guys like Chad talked that they target those fish specifically, a specific angler?
So I can't really speak for the intentions of those anglers. What I can speak to is that blue ribbon status is based on a number of variables. And, you know, abundance of fish, size of fish, uniqueness of the fishery, all of those variables are put in there. Regulations are one of the variables there. It is not the determining factor for blue ribbon status.
Okay, thank you.
Does Barney have the same cutthroat in Manning?
Yes, they're Bonneville cutthroat trout as well.
Any other questions from the RAC?
Stay there, Mike. We're gonna have questions for the public.
Yep. We will go to any questions from the public. Just a reminder, you can stand where you're at, but please.
Craig has a comment.
Oh, go ahead, Craig. I think
Craig, you're on mute.
I think you're on mute there, Craig.
Thanks, guys. I was down for so long. I wanted to make sure Mike had the floor. Yeah, I just wanted to point out that Mike's proposed regulations, both at Manning Meadow and Barney, specifically at Manning Meadow, really speak to the overall conservation success that we've had with Bonneville cutthroat trout statewide. It is an indication that we are pivoting away from active conservation for cutthroat trout in the state of Utah and moving into a maintenance mode. In fact, you know, we're moving into a time when most of the management activities related to cutthroat trout in the state are going to be revolving around sport fish populations. And the brood for those sport fish populations are currently secure in our hatcheries. Specifically, the brood that is represented here at Manning Meadow is represented at our Mammoth Creek Fish Hatchery. So there's no, I know there were some issues or some questions that were posed about the potential impact to cutthroat trout conservation. I just wanted to clarify that this is actually an indication that we have reached a milestone and have been successful. With regard to the question related to overall angler survey representation between fly anglers and bait anglers, we make sure that we are sampling representative to the proportion of anglers in each region. So the southern region received a proportional amount of survey requests. Within those respondents, there is equal representation, 50-50 among licensed anglers that we surveyed, both for flying lure anglers as well as for bait anglers as far as their preference and tackle. So the likelihood that each one would have received a survey is equal. So we feel that we had representation from both audiences or both user groups. One other thing I did want to mention, Mike indicated that we stock 2-inch fish. As we move into efforts to be more efficient with the fish that we stock, many of our fisheries are going to be managed similar to Manning and Barney, where it is going to be a put, grow, and take situation. And I just wanted to point that out, that stocking larger fish in all of our reservoirs isn't necessarily the answer. There is likely a maximum size that can be obtained by fish in certain systems. So as long as we can get them to grow to that size, we feel that we're making the wisest use of our fish in that system. And the last thing I wanted to put in there was related to, what did I have written down? Sorry, guys. It'll come to me later. If it comes to me, I'll ping in again. Sorry.
Thanks, Craig.
Can I make just a couple of clarifications to Craig's comments? So when we've talked about 2 different angler surveys here. So the one that Craig was focusing on, where it's sent out to targeted groups, that was our public survey, online survey that was sent out earlier this year. We did an angler survey right at Manning Meadow Reservoir in 2022. That was done over a 4-month period of the year, where we had employees out on the ground talking to anglers several times each month and interviewing them at the reservoir while they were fishing. Another thing to clarify is our brood, our Bonneville cutthroat trout brood for southern Utah, is actually not backed up at our Mammoth Creek hatchery. There are some other groups of cutthroat trout that are there. We have a number of populations on the landscape across the southern region where we can go, and basically the brood is backed up within wild populations across southern Utah. If we needed to draw more for a brood, we could do that from those populations.
Thank you.
Correct, or Mike?
Yes.
I guess we don't have a copy of the questions that were actually asked on these surveys to look at, do we?
Craig might have those in front of him. It presented the proposals and asked if they were, if the anglers were in support or not.
A lot of my experience with these surveys that have went out has been, they almost trick people. And I sat on one of the meetings on the new mule deer plan, and when the surveys came back without what some of them there wanted to hear, all arms were up in the air. And then in the same survey, they almost changed their answers because of the way the question was asked.
So yeah, that was, in fact, as we designed the survey with folks in our outreach section, that was one of the main talking points, is that we need to make sure that the questions were asked so that it could, it didn't lead the answer, so that the public could, give their response on how they felt about the regulations as presented.
Did we have another question?
Craig's got his hand up.
No.
Okay.
Mike.
And then,
Craig,
go ahead, Craig. You're muted again, buddy.
Man, virtual's bad. All right. So first, I remembered what I wanted to say, and thank you, Mike, for the clarification on my statements. There was a question asked about the difference between the behaviors between fly and lure anglers versus bait anglers. The one major difference, and this comes out of our statewide survey that we undertook in 2022, and it's kind of a no-brainer, but I figured I'd throw it out there anyway, is that fly and lure anglers are not harvest-oriented anglers. It's not about the size of fish that they're seeking. It's about the catch and release experience that they would like. And that's where the rub really comes in as far as these two different user groups, is one being harvest oriented, one not being harvest oriented and steeped in what they view as conservation. So I think we have some discussions that need to be had with flying lure anglers statewide to make sure that they are getting their opportunities out there and what they view as their preferred use of the resource moving forward. Yeah, that to me is the number one thing that I just wanted to point out.
Craig, would it be beneficial then, with that being said, on Monroe Mountain? I don't know what you've got up there, maybe 10 reservoirs, to maybe have one that's left for the fly and lure anglers as is, instead of changing them all to bait.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be working with each of our 5 regional managers in the coming years to do just that. Basically, what we'd like to have is proportional opportunities on the landscape based upon representation in our angling public. The end game is to provide satisfying fishing experiences. The interesting thing is when we talk about lakes and reservoirs, that becomes harder to do. Segregating anglers by preferences and behaviors becomes more difficult because we have a limited number of reservoirs and we're not making a ton. That being said, we can go in one water, and I think this is kind of what Mike's trying to do, is create diverse opportunities at individual lakes. We're not limiting the access to a water body by creating a bait regulation. We're opening it up to all players. You're not restricted from using flies and lures at that water. And I think that gets us in a mindset when we're dealing with lakes and reservoirs of having diverse opportunities and allowing people to segregate on the water away from one another if they view one activity impinging ability to enjoy their version of fishing. When it comes to streams and rivers, that's different. With the thousands of miles of streams that we have in the state of Utah, the ability to segregate angler groups, you've all probably fished in states where you've seen this, where you have fly and lure sections, fly only sections. That is a little bit easier to carve out those niches. It's something we need to wrap our minds around. Utah's population is growing. Angler participation per capita is stable. The number of anglers out there is growing. The diverse arrays in which people fish is becoming more diverse year on year. We need to be able to start carving up the landscape. We want to make sure that people don't come into conflict with one another, because in the long run, we need all the anglers coming together to speak with one voice if we're going to address things like water needs.
Thank you, Craig. Any other questions before we turn it over to the public? All right. Again, as a reminder, if you do have a question, this is just the question portion. We'll have a comment portion here in a minute, so please just keep it to questions. If you do have questions, just stand where you're at, introduce yourself and who you represent. We'll now turn it over to the public.
John Lloyd, I represent myself. I'm from Monroe, Utah. I'm wondering, maybe for Mike or Mr. Walker, do you have data on the number of respondents, specifically on Manning and Barney, that are from Sevier County and or Paiute County?
I'll answer that. We do. We don't have it broken out that way. But anytime somebody, when they respond to our online, they give a zip code. So we have them down to the level of zip code. I don't have it broken out to that level, but we can get that information.
So on the survey, I didn't receive a survey, but I'm wondering if somebody in St. George, Utah, the southern region's big, right? It covers St. George, right? Iron County, Beaver. Were the respondents asked if they even know what Barney Lake is and if they've ever recreated there?
I'd have to ask Craig on that.
They're not. We allow people to respond with neutral, which indicates to me that they do not have an opinion on that. So the answer is no.
So maybe the more relevant survey to that would be the creel survey that they did on location, and maybe Mike can talk about those, if that helps at all.
Yeah, in that survey, we solely measured the amount of use, harvest, catch, those metrics. We didn't ask any opinion questions. At the time, we were not planning immediately to bring a regulation proposal, so it wasn't on the mind. We let the data, the proposal came out from all the data that we've been collecting, catch data, the reservoir, and that angler survey.
Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, just to respond a little bit about the methodology, when we look at the obvious bias, potential bias to have, the heavy hitters of St. George, Salt Lake, or whatever it is, when we're talking about a statewide survey, seemingly overwhelm the vote, if you will, of smaller counties throughout the state. What we try to do is actually overrepresent those counties as far as the respondent pool. So, if we anticipate getting only 60 respondents in a county that is smaller, we'll try to ask 5, 6, 7 times the number of respondents and actually inflate the proportion of their representation relative to other counties to try and inflate the actual number of responses we get. What we do find, and I don't know what the issue is here, is that in some of our more rural counties, for the individuals that we are able to contact and survey, our response rates are lower.
Thank you, Craig.
Jimmy Garrett, Monroe, just represent myself. With the restrictions on the dates for fishing Manning Meadows to protect the brood hatchery, are there other areas in the state that have the same restrictions on the dates you can fish? Or are there other brood fisheries that are open? If you're looking at opening up the fishing, why is there still restrictions on?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So for about 30 years now is where we've been really working on establishing cutthroat trout brood populations across the state. They represent the different subspecies of cutthroat trout that we have, as well as individual groupings within those subspecies. So Manning Meadow is the brood population for the southern Bonneville range. It has been common practice since, those broods were established 30 years ago, to have these restricted regulations. That was kind of a blanket. Anytime we developed a brood, to put those regulations in place to protect the brood. At the time when we started doing this in the 90s, it was very clear that we needed to take some pretty, strong conservation measures to protect these populations. Over time, we have seen that need dwindle. So basically, like Craig mentioned, this is really a success story. The Bonneville cutthroat trout in Utah are more secure than they ever have been before. And we're also seeing that our brood populations are also very, very secure. This one in particular is one of the most productive brood populations in Utah. And really the data shows that that level of protection is not necessary to maintain this brood. The fish in there have a very high level of survival after they're stocked. They maintain that survival throughout their lifetime. They're very abundant, and also our needs for collecting eggs from those fish have reduced over the years, just due to the fact of completing conservation actions, restoration projects. We don't need as many fish as we used to. So at this point, the brood population is far outweighing our actual needs from it. And so it feels like that level of protection is excessive for what is the purpose of the population. And so this is an opportunity to maybe step back and say that those blanket regulations for brood populations may not be necessary in every situation. And we can kind of maybe start sending a new message to the angling public that these fish can be utilized in different manners and, you know, be enjoyed by more segments of the public.
I have a follow-up question. So you say there's 30 years of management and net surveys at Manning. In regards to Barney, online, I could only, the last net survey, I believe was 2020 unless.
Yes.
That's the last net
Yes.
survey, so nothing in the last couple of years besides creel surveys.
So at Barney Reservoir, we have not completed a creel survey there. Creel surveys are very intensive. They're highly costly because you have to send somebody out multiple times each month. So we have to pick, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 water bodies each year. And so they're usually the highest use.
So when you asked earlier about the winter kill at Barney, you say you based it off of creel surveys, but they haven't been a creel survey or a net survey.
No, that's based off of angler reports.
Just angry.
Yes.
Okay, that's just
Yes.
making sure I got.
And I'll make it, the other thing to clarify is that for small water bodies like Barney, you know, regular netting we found isn't really necessary, you know, annual, yearly netting. The places that we go and survey annually are usually our highest use water bodies, our most complex water bodies, usually the largest fisheries. Smaller water bodies like Barney Lake or even lakes on Boulder Mountain typically don't need that level of scrutiny. It's just we can't get to all those places every year. So we found that rotations of, you know, anywhere from 3 to 5 years is usually sufficient for us to be able to see what trends are going. But that's also because in the interim, we do have reports from anglers that can give us some indication of what's happening as well.
Any other questions from the?
Yeah, I'm Mike James. I represent myself, I guess, but I'm also an outfitter guide, and I fish manning quite often. My question is, what are the numbers of what do you have fish per number on your nets or out of your general surveys out of Manning compared to similar waters that don't have the same, that allow bait fishing on them?
Right. Yeah. So at Manning Meadow, one of the things we look at for our fish density or fish abundance is we look at a number of fish caught per net. And currently, I looked at the last few years, it ranges from about 100 to 150 fish per net. And for that style of net, for the size, the length that it is, typically we see more on the range of 50 or less in a water body that is considered very strong, healthy, good fishing opportunities. So this is up to 3 times that rate. That is one of the reasons why we feel like it could handle some harvest and less fish. It's very high compared to just about everywhere else that we monitor.
Maybe talk about just from a biological standpoint, why up to a certain point, more isn't necessarily better when it comes to fish. What the trade-offs are there. Yeah,
so fish, especially trout, follow what's called density dependent growth. So the higher the density in a population, the more competition there are for resources because the resources are a set amount. So if you increase the number of fish in there, there's less resources, there's less food to go around. They also spend more energy competing for those limited resources. So it really can reduce their growth rates and the fish just don't grow as big as they could if they were at a lower density where there's less competition, more food to go around for each fish. So the notion that we're going to increase the numbers of fish and get bigger fish usually does not, it rarely works out to be that way. Typically, if you get more fish, you get smaller fish.
Would it make sense then when you guys are stripping these eggs to take these fish and put them already at a decent size into another body of water where they let that kind of fish be and then not have to grow them from babies and take away from that resource and let the anglers catch them that way when you're already up there catching them, I guess.
So there's two reasons we wouldn't, and the number one reason we absolutely can't, and that is because the fish in Manning Meadow Reservoir have whirling disease, and we cannot transfer those to any other water body. So first, Manning Meadow specifically, we cannot The other issue that we run into is if you grab some of these fish that are full-sized and move them to another water body, they won't necessarily adapt. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the anglers are going to be able to enjoy those fish. It's not something that we do regularly, simply because the management practices that we have are, we can grow those same fish in a hatchery with very little investment and allow them to grow naturally in the water body where they're stocked, and they'll perform better over time. And they'll still provide anglers with what they're looking for. It's just a lot more efficient to do it that way than to go and pick up some of these adult fish and move them. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Chad?
Chad, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Thank you. So I just wanted to follow up with that. Mike, you said earlier that these, on my camera, these fish are typically get up to 16, 17 inches, that they're healthy in there. That doesn't sound like a stunted population. Doesn't sound like you have a trophy fish in there by any means, but it doesn't sound like a stunted population. Would that be, wouldn't a 16 or 17 inch trout be considered a quality trout on most bodies of water?
Yeah, you're right. That's the thing. That's why I didn't use the word stunted. I wouldn't call them stunted. I would call them overabundant, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're running into really poor growth. It just means that their growth isn't maximized where it could be. But again, that isn't kind of our main goal here. It is hopefully a byproduct that we would see a little better growth, but still be abundant. But really, it just comes down to the fact that we have an abundant, strong population that really doesn't need the level of protection that it has currently.
And do you think part of that abundant, strong population is due to the artificial and fly anglers' propensity to catch and release?
I would say the abundance is, yes. The growth in the population itself is really, a couple of things. So it's determined by, first of all, the productivity in the water body itself. It's a productive water, so that's why you can still have some healthy fish. But the other, the density ultimately is determined by the amount of fish going in and the amount of fish coming out. So we stock 15,000 fish every year. The amount of harvest each year by anglers is, we measured it at about 170 fish total. You can add another 200 to 300 harvested by our netting survey. So that's up to, maybe 500 fish per year removed by anglers and us. Everything else, all the removal is by natural mortality. So the lack of harvest certainly is one of the driving factors to the abundance. Now, whether you want to put in the healthiness of the fish, that's really determined by the productivity that they have at the current density.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, I think Mike hit it pretty squarely. I just wanted to add, the idea of compensatory mortality, of having freeboard that can be harvested, is where we're at in this population. And that is why we have an opportunity to provide anglers with something that they haven't had at this water, because of our need to have it be a conservation population, brood population for the past 30 years. Again, pivoting into a more successful time from cutthroat trout conservation standpoint, and wanting to open up that resource and have it be used rather than have it just take a nap in the sediment, is where we're at on this. And I think Mike is, in my opinion, making the right call. We're not limiting anybody's access to this. And it is probably going to be the future of angling in Utah. We're all going to have to get along on particular water bodies and have different user groups use the same water bodies, especially when we're talking about lakes and reservoirs.
Thanks, Craig. Any other questions from the public? All right, we will now move.
Let me summarize my comments. Thank you, Joe. Thank you. So we didn't have a ton of comments, but we had some really good comments. We had 16 people that chimed in on the overall presentation. We spent most of our time here talking about Manning Meadows. There was a lot more to the proposal than just that. But a lot of the comments did, well, there were really three areas that the comments kind of focused on. So spearfishing, we had a lot of people in the spearfishing community that were expressing their opinion in favor of the regulation changes that are proposed for spearfishing. The other two categories were Manning and Barney Reservoir, which those that got on and commented, it was similar to the sentiments we're hearing here tonight. There's some uneasiness there, I think, in the public that commented online. And then the other one, which we don't have represented here tonight, at least I haven't heard, is regulations on bass fishing in the Washington County waters and those mixed. So overall, it was split almost 50-50 on supporting or not supporting the overall regulation. But with 16 comments, so that's kind of where we're at. If you read them and there's something to add there, please do so.
Craig, you have a comment again?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we are starting up a black bass, smallmouth bass, largemouth bass management team effort in 2025. And we hope to allay a lot of the fears that were put forward in the comments regarding bass regulations in southern Utah, but also about bass regulations generally in Utah, working with those groups in the same way that we've worked with tiger muskie anglers to come to consensus on what we view as the appropriate suite of regulations for various management objectives is where we're headed. We anticipate that being a 2-year process. So we hope to, and I had hoped that individuals would be here tonight so I could invite them to put their name in the hat, so to speak, to participate in that effort. Anybody is more than welcome to become a member of the team effort as we move forward in 2025.
Thank you, Craig. I do have 3 comment cards in regards to agenda item number 6. So we'll go just in this order. The first is James Garrett, and followed by Chad Lloyd. You got a timer? It'll be on the screen. You've got a timer on the screen, so just you'll be able to go ahead and just stand up where you're at, and 3 minutes.
Okay, say I'm Jimmy Garrett, just a local resident here, but an avid fisherman. I respect the rural law. I typically sleep out the second Saturday in July for Manning Meadows to open up, because it is a premier fishing destination for many of us that live here and around the state. Really brought my attention, my comment specifically is for Barney Reservoir. I say fish it quite a bit and keep good notes, good logs. And as of 2 years ago, it's been absolutely decimated with the fish population. I've talked to multiple people and I haven't caught a fish. I talked to Brian this morning. What'd you see this weekend? Or the ripple?
What he's talking about is I was up there about 3 weeks ago, and there wasn't even a fish on the water right in the evening, on a cool evening.
Yeah, and like I say, that's why I was surprised when I saw the proposal to open it up for bait fishing there. On a side note, a couple years back, I was out fishing on my float tube, and some guys came up and were bait fishing, and I mean, they proceeded to just hammer the fish. I called up Gabe on the cell phone and said, "Hey, there's guys up here bait fishing," and say, "Oh, we don't have any guys out that can respond." But if you allow bait fishing there, it'll decimate that fishery. Whatever's left of it now, just to recover, I don't think it'll recover from that. That being said, it left, had to clean up all their trash, dead fish, hook, and with Manning, there's a lot of fish there, and it's that's why my buddy was telling me today, it's probably the premier dry fly fishing destination around. Like you said, there's very limited resources for us that enjoy fly fishing to go to. Minersville may be the closest one. You kind of mentioned the ones that are around here, but yeah, Upper Box Creek, Lower Box Creek, Otter Creek, Big Lake, Deep Lake, anywhere you can go bait fish. All the community ponds, which I love to take my nieces and nephew to, but I feel like opening those lakes up to, and that's why I asked the questions about the timeframes on manning meadows, because it's restrictive. He says those could be, if we're wanting to take more fish out, why don't we just open up to 4 fish and then take that time away, you know, but keep it a destination for those that enjoy fly fishing and teaching others as well. How much time do I have?
I didn't
Yeah, the
see-
timer
okay,
is
I got 3 more minutes. Just kidding. Well, of course, I deal a lot with the fly fishing community, but that's a common sentiment that I get from in the comments that he mentioned too. I got a message from my friend Dad McGuire, is also a local fisherman. He could have had soccer practice for his kid, but he wanted me to read this. As a local fisherman that utilizes manning meadows many times each year, I would like to voice my opposition to the proposal rule changes, removing the artificial flies and lure only restrictions on manning meadows and Barney reservoirs. These pristine mountain reservoirs are the only local waters that have such restrictions, and has been a nice resource to help encourage fly fishing and lure techniques without having to compete with other fishermen using baiting techniques. I have nothing against bait fishing in general, but there are ample fishing opportunities in the vicinity that allow all fishing techniques. I believe reserving these couple reservoirs as artificial flies and lures only helps maintain their uniqueness and value as fly fishing destination waters. Submit that. Thank you.
All right, next will be Chad Lloyd, followed by Ken Strong.
Yeah, Chad Lloyd again from Monroe. I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to come and speak. I appreciate all of your service on the board and those that work for the DNR. Appreciate the good work you do. Mr. Hadley, I respect your work. I know you put in all your time and effort to make sure we have quality fisheries. I commented, I'm one of the commenters, so I just kind of wanted to reiterate some of the things. I'm sure you've read most of my feelings, and I echo a lot of what Jimmy said. I don't think it would be exaggeratory to say I think Jimmy and me probably fish Barney Lake more than anybody I know. It's right up the mountain. We live at the base of Monroe. We're there all the time. I was upset to see in the video that was presented at the last board meeting that it was told to all of you and all of the public that Barney Lake had a good fish population in it. On your own website, it admits that there was winter kill back in the 21-22 winter. That winter kill happened again in 22-23. In the spring of 23, that lake was horrible. I know it's been stocked since then in 23 and now in 24. So there probably are some fish swimming around. Those little 2-inchers are, I don't know how big they are now, but I'm sure you could run up there on a given evening and maybe see different than what Bryant saw the other day. You might see some fish activity, but the healthy population of trophy tigers that was in that lake 4 years ago when you did your netting survey, I'm pretty sure it's gone. It's interesting to hear Mr. Hadley's comments and the comments that Manning is really driving the decision on Barney, because in my mind, they're 2 completely different fisheries. Manning offers a really big recreational opportunity for people. There's campers, there's trailers, there's families there, kayaking, there's canoes, there's an abundance and a variety of people at Manning. Barney isn't that. Barney's a little out of the way, a little harder to access. You can't pull your camper there. Trailers aren't even allowed up the road. Barney's a place to get away, and instead of catching quantity of fish, which you do at Manning, run up to Manning and catch quantity, you go to Barney to catch quality. And yeah, the last few years it hasn't been that. But turning it into a bait fishery, I think would devastate it from ever becoming the trophy fishery again. I think that population of tiger trout would be eliminated pretty quickly by throwing some worms and some grub, some power bait minnows in there. I do question the validity of the survey. I know it's probably scientifically accurate, but even if you were to send out 3,000 survey results here in Sevier County alone, people on the north end of the county probably never fished Barney Lake, and they would respond, sure, turn it into a bait fishery. I don't go there, I don't care. Anyway, my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chef. All right, Ken, and then followed by Michael James.
Have something help me stand up. I'm Ken Strong, and I'm representing two groups today. The main one is Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife. The other one is Utah Anglers Coalition. And Utah Anglers Coalition is a huge group of fishermen that get together once a month. They discuss everything there is to do with fishing in the state of Utah. And we work quite close with Craig Walker and his two counterparts in getting this stuff. And Utah Anglers Coalition agrees with everything supports everything on the survey with the exception of the ice hole of Flaming Gorge. Now, the United Parcel Service, we are also against increasing the size of the ice hole on the Utah side in Flaming Gorge. How big of a hole do you need to get a big fish through? 18 inches, which should fit any hole. And in Wyoming, you can take a chainsaw and cut a 20-foot by 30-foot hole if you want. Now, the other reason that we're thinking this, I know the division wants to meet with Wyoming and agree, so there's no question. But they don't do that on everything, and the ice hole is one thing that's dangerous. On the Wyoming side of Flaming Gorge, the water is shallower. It freezes first, and it freezes thicker. On the Utah side, the farther down towards the dam you get, it doesn't freeze, or not always freezes. And when somebody's taking their kids up there and they're walking across and you've got a 1-inch thing of ice with snow over it, you're gonna end up stepping in a hole that could be huge. And it's a real big safety issue. Now, I agree with Brian, what he said, and this gentleman, when they says they don't like the survey setup. I don't agree with the way it's done. I don't agree with the way they ask the questions, but I have to roll with what they say. But the ice hole is something on Flaming Gorge that's dangerous. It could end up, I know Craig will tell you that there hasn't been an issue in Wyoming. But remember, Wyoming ice freezes first, it gets thicker, and there may not be an issue there, but on the Utah side, there's a very big issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. All right, and our last comment, Michael James.
I'm probably not gonna need all my 3 minutes, but maybe I will, who knows. I help with a lot of the gillnet surveys and stuff, and I generally am 100% in favor of what you guys are doing, but with Manning Meadow, we spend a lot of time up there fishing, and that's just one that we gotta have. We like the high population of fish in there. They're healthy. I always know that I can go up there and get my clientele and fish, whether they're brand new or expert. I've got a lot of aging clientele now, and access to that water is really good, and moving them around is difficult. And so as soon as I can put them on the water and they can have success immediately, that's been a huge benefit for us. Whether they keep them or don't keep them is not really my concern. I'm not opposed as to raising the limit, but changing it over to bait fishermen
last year I watched bait fishermen up there fishing, and in fact, the guy next to me was bait fishing, and the amount of fish that using worms draws in just blew me away. I mean, it was pretty impressive. In fact, when he left his worm containers there, and just throwing the rest of those worms out there, drew in, I can't even tell how many fish that, I mean, it drew in a significant amount of fish. But yeah, like I said, I'm usually 100% in favor of what the DNR is doing and support you guys. But on Manning Meadow, I really oppose changing that to allowing bait up there and Barney. I like the way that it's set up now and would like to see it stay the same.
Thank you. All right, we will now have the RAC discussion. First, go ahead, Brian.
I think if you've been listening, you kind of know I've talked to some of these guys. They've called me. I've talked to several others in the area, and it's always disappointing when you show up to these meetings that some of them never show up. I think there's a reason for that, and I think the reason a lot of people don't show up is they think that Salt Lake or, you know, on a bigger level, Washington might just get their way because of their big numbers and the power they have. I'm not saying that's what this is, but that's the feeling that people are getting. And I think you need to listen to local people, because once this leaves here tonight, I'd be surprised if you hear much discussion about Manning or Barney, unless some of these groups write letters to other RACs, go speak in person to the wildlife board. And sometimes you need to listen to your local base. There's very few people across the state probably come here, as some of these guys said, or even know where they are. When I look at some of the lakes that we had on this proposal, I thought to myself, well, yeah, I can vote for that. I don't know where that's at. I don't know what that is, but there's probably someone up there who cares about whatever is being proposed there. And I think as to Barney, you're going to see more traffic if you open it up there, and there isn't room for parking for that many people up there. It's hard to even pass people sometimes on that road. Manning, you will see the banks lined with people. You'll see more trash around the lake. Once it's opened up to bait fishing, it is a success story, as you said. I think that it should stay that way, and let's not change it. Let's not change Barney. Just to me, the status quo, or allow more people there. I was up there this weekend, and it was hard to even get down the roads on Mineral Mountain this weekend with all the people up there. Some of that, I'm sure, is because the Beaver has been closed down, and so you get all the wheelers up there. As to the ice holes, I kind of agree with what Mr. Strong said about that. I don't think we have to meet Wyoming and what everyone else wants. I think we can stay with what we have. I don't think you need a big ice hole. I think I'm pretty well covered about everything I want to cover there. I do think you need to listen to your locals, leave it how it is. And Riley or Austin, when you go up there, you need to bring that to the wildlife board and those, because there will be people in northern regions don't even know what we're talking about down here. So, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Can I just say amen?
Yeah, you can say Chad has a comment. Go ahead, Chad.
Thank you. I appreciate all of the comments. I appreciate the DWR for all the work and the presentation on this. You know, I think Mike said it best when he said, when I asked him to name the bodies of water in southern Utah that have artificial fly and lure only, and he said it's a handful. I can name it on one hand. And that's really the point. If we want to serve a diverse body of fishermen, we need a few waters for anglers that want to catch and release and to fly fish and to be able to dry fly, and the artificial angler to be able to throw spinner. It's a different experience when you fish a body of water that is artificial fly and lure only. Your catch rates are higher, the quality of the fish is higher, usually the reservoir is cleaner. It's a different experience, and I can tell you that when Kolob changed, even to have from Memorial Day to Labor Day, the experience changed substantially. It used to be a reservoir where you could go and dry fly fish all summer long, catch big fish, lots of them, and that ability to dry fly like we could before the change is not there anymore. These reservoirs, and I fished both of these reservoirs in Manning Meadow more than Barney, they're known in the artificial fly community, and I've been contacted by numerous anglers in St. George that have asked me to voice my opinion and their opinion on this. And I would encourage you not to embrace this change. Part of the success is the catch and release. Do those fish eventually die and grow old? Yeah, they do. But that's the point, is that it's a different experience. Not every experience needs to be a foot intake reservoir. And so I'd encourage the board to consider, the Wildlife Board, when they hear this, and those members that are here, to consider rejecting these proposals as to Barney and Manning Meadow. As to the bass angling in Washington County, I sat on that committee to recommend the changes to Quail Creek, Sand Hollow, and Gunlock. And I will just represent that there was a diverse body of bass anglers present on that committee. We took a long time. I think we had 6 weeks on that, and some lengthy meetings. And it was a unanimous vote to recommend those regulation changes. We were convinced through the process that Sand Hollow would benefit from the take of more bass. So I wanted to add that in, even though there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion on that, especially for the Wildlife Board members that are here listening. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. Any other comments? Vernon?
More of a question. So I'm not a fisherman, and a couple of last time we met or the time before, I brought up what is the death loss on catch and release? Just, curious. And to me, that was significant, the death loss. But I come from a different background because I don't fish, but I used to, my dad and brother-in-law raised fish. And we could raise the prettiest fish, they grow fast, then sell them to fish out ponds in other states, usually, because Utah was hard to get through the regulations. But anyway, so at these, the Barney and Manning, as it is now, are they either or bait or fly, or these bait fishers are seeing, are they breaking the law?
They're breaking the law. Yeah. Mike, is there a significant difference in the mortality rate on fish that are released in an artificial fly and lure situation versus a bait fishing situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there have been a number of studies done throughout the past on those mortality rates. And yes, all things being equal, the mortality on released fish caught by flies and lures is much lower than it is on bait. However, when we do our angler surveys, we consistently see catch rates much higher amongst fly and lure anglers. So if you actually factor in that much higher catch rate, the actual affected mortality by both methods is not as different as if the catch rates were exactly the same.
I just wanted to clarify that, because I think the
Yeah.
question that Merlin asked
Yes.
before was very general, and this is a more specific.
So is it true that, am I thinking correctly that these bait fishers they're harvesting, they're not catching and releasing? So
In general, we see much higher harvest rates amongst anglers who are using bait. Yes.
I do have one more question.
Just a second. Go ahead.
Okay, I just had a comment about the presentation, maybe a request. I know it comes once a year, so it's a request for next year. But I found there wasn't a lot of data that made it hard to assess. Like nearly every presentation was like, here's one survey number. I think having the local county survey number broken out would be super helpful. And also not just it's good or it's bad, but like what are the population numbers? What are the density in the nets? Like that would be very useful.
We provided that comment in building the survey, but that's kind of type of information that would feed survey responses. So the onus is then on what is the other avenue of getting that information out? That's a valid question.
I think
Craig
we'll
had a
go, we'll go to Craig, so I think he's in response to that, and then to Brian.
Yeah, I think that the comment was related to the presentation itself and presenting the information in a more granular format where we actually show, what the response rate was at the county level. What we did, and I think at the outset of the survey, we described it, is we took the lowest survey number across counties, across interest groups, across all of the different things we look at, and that was the presentation, the presented amount of support that we described there. We started off with each of these regulations having 4 or 5 slides. We would have been giving you guys like a 3-hour whirlwind movie. I don't know what. We were told to cut it way back. So we cut it back to about a 40-minute presentation, and I apologize even for that length. A lot of regulation changes this year. It's not going to be unique moving forward as we address the challenges I mentioned. The number of regulations that we're going to have to put forward to adapt to the various changes and successes in this case they're going to be high. So we need to figure out a way to provide you all with maybe the raw data behind this that isn't necessarily in the presentation itself for those that want to do a deep dive.
Yeah, great. So I think the other thing I would recommend is keep track of those questions. We will always have our local expertise here, and they'll answer questions all night long for you. Austin does that, and it's a good way to do it. So.
Go ahead, Brian.
Is there still and maybe I'm thinking you're only having the regulation, but is there a size limit on fish caught right now?
No, that was removed in 2015. That was another attempt to, at the time of that change, it was 1 over 18 inches. That was essentially a catch and release regulation because we did not see any fish over 18 inches in the reservoir. So that was the first attempt to allow a little bit more use and see if it would affect the population. That was one of the reasons we did that angler survey in 2022 to evaluate that change. And what we saw was that the harvest was still very, very minimal.
I was just gonna say, if you have questions for the biologists, I talk to them all the time when these proposals come out. I talk to the wildlife biologists, I talk to the fish biologists, I call them and ask, and they'll give you the data. So you don't have to wait till this meeting, you can call them.
That's true too. That's a good point.
Okay. Did you have a comment?
Well, I guess a lot of what everybody has said, I thought, but when I came here, I thought, well, gosh, the couple times I do fish, you've got a guy with the fly or the lure and he's catching all the fish, and the guy with the bait doesn't seem to, and that's usually me. And so to me, I'm like, well, I couldn't see any reason not to vote for it, but I do think we do need to listen to the locals sometimes. I think they get lost in the shuffle. And so, so I'm leaning that way a little bit as far as my vote. And on the older gentleman, the size of the hole, how to be a really big fish if it couldn't go through. You know, I don't know. It just seems like it makes it more dangerous. I don't know.
Thank you.
Is there a reason that that was proposed, that particular size?
For consistency with Wyoming
That
was
the
the
only
main,
reason.
was the
Yeah.
main.
Right.
Well, I do have a couple of comments. First, I want to thank the division, especially. I learned a lot on this. When you grow up in Animal, Utah, and now you're talking about Flaming Gorge, a place that I've only been to a couple times, and it didn't even occur to me, other than like Lake Powell, which is closer to home, where you've got different regulations with, across state lines, to look at the cohesiveness of trying to work with two states. And I appreciate the comments about, hey, we are Utah, and we do get to do our own thing, but we're talking years and years and years of progress trying to get things in line and to try to get it a little bit easier, both from to be able to oversight from our officers, to just getting the verbiage, all of those things. I really appreciated that. Also, Chad, thank you very much for that information on, being able to sit in on that. That's also something I'm familiar with. Sand Hollow fished it, but all of this is new information to me. So much like my other fellow RAC members, a lot of the stuff that happens in different places I'm not as familiar with. I am very familiar with Manning and Barney, all the lakes on the Boulder. That's right in my backyard. And so I can appreciate the sentiment from those, and I appreciate the comments and you being willing to come and share those with us tonight as well. Truly, we do appreciate that. I have a lot of boys. We're avid outdoorsmen. I have one that is an amazing fly fisherman, and I have another one that wants to be, but he's not. And so I'm a little bit split on it, I'll be honest, because if I were to take them to Manning, one of them would have a great time and one of them would not. And I would hate to segregate my own family because of that. That being said, I'm very familiar with Barney, and so I would also kind of maybe pose a question. Would there be a way, and would the division look at separating the two of those? Because I like the idea of the success story of Manning, and I like what it's done, and it's been able to contribute to a lot of different places throughout the state as a breeding ground for our Bonneville cutthroat. Barney could be, in my mind, I don't know why they couldn't be treated as separate and keep it as an artificial only, and yet open it up to Manning, knowing that, as Mike stated, that we're watching this really closely. If there is a fear of decimating or whatever, we can make those changes pretty quickly. That's why I asked one of those questions initially. Is that something that the division would look at? Correct, Mike?
I think Gabe is the best one here to respond to that. From an enforcement standpoint, you're familiar with Manning and Barney. Maybe come up and just talk. Do you see it being what would the issue be? Big, small, indifferent? If the regulations were different at Barney versus Manning?
So, excuse me, the issue is consistency. People coming through. So I can tell you what it is right now. Manning Meadows is probably the most frequented lake by recreators because it's a nice road, it's a beautiful lake, and it's everybody's destination coming and going, usually on that route. And so no matter how many signs we put up around that lake with the regulations, we're right in lot of tickets for people fishing. The majority of them just, they should know the rules, but they just don't read the signs and they're doing it, just making a mistake.
They throw a fishing pole on their side by side, and they see the
Yeah,
lake and they stop and fish.
It's a beautiful lake and it's always full of water. You know, I've never seen it really down. So Barney Lake, it's harder to get to. People who usually go there, that's a destination. There is an ATV trail, it's a 50-inch that goes around it. And so people, if they don't have a 50-incher, they either go around the gate or they turn around there and they either go fish it or they go home. And so if those lakes aren't the same regulations, we will see more violations at Barney than we do already currently right now. So Manning is a different regulation than Barney. I think you'll have people just that are fishing Manning with bait, and assuming you can go up to Barney and fish it as well with bait.
What's the space between them?
Manning is a branch off, or Barney's a branch off from Manning, and I think it's about maybe a mile below Barney is where, or below Manning is where the Barney Lake turns off. And then that road itself is probably less than 3 miles to the lake. Could be closer to 2. And it's a rougher road. I mean, you can drive a pickup truck on it, but you're not taking a camp trailer. It's Monroe's a side-by-side mountain anymore.
So they're a couple miles apart at least.
Yeah, you can be from one to the other in 10 minutes.
Somebody thinks we don't.
Right.
Craig?
Yeah, from a statewide perspective, you know, I just want to express my thanks for the opinions that you all put forward, the thought that you put into your comments on the Manning Meadow Barney situation. We're always more than willing to work with our angler group, especially ones that are focused on a particular method or a particular species or have a particular behavior. You know, the spear angling is a good example of something that we've undertaken over the past 3 years, working with a group of spear anglers that is represented across the state, coming up with their thoughts on what their wants and needs are, and trying to work with the regional personnel, including law enforcement, to come up with regulations or opportunities at particular water bodies that don't interfere with other fishing, while at the same time meet the needs of what we can consider to be a special interest group. I think that a much larger group is the fly and lure only, artificial only crowd in Utah. Like I said, we're more than willing to work with you, making sure that, as you did, vet decisions through law enforcement and vet them through what was mentioned earlier, which is kind of that local lens. We want to make sure that we are providing opportunities proportional to the demand at a regional scale, at a county level scale, so that we're not forcing people to drive 3, 4, 5 hours to get what they're looking for out of a fishing experience. So again, reach out to me. I'm happy to start putting you all on the queue to the next management team, which will probably be moving around something like fly and lure opportunities in the state. So holler at me. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. I would entertain a motion from the RAC. Chad? Chad?
But I don't know if it's a motion or not.
I'm happy to make the motion. I do have a comment before I make that, and that is, we just haven't seen artificial fly and lure only waters proposed in southern Utah in a very long time. In fact, nobody could remember the last time. But we do see regulations to terminate those waters every few years. In fact, just a few years ago, we had a RAC where the DNR attempted to terminate the artificial fly and lure only on Mammoth Creek. And so the reason people are passionate about this is because there are very few waters where you can have this experience, just a handful. And every other water around, you can have an experience where you can fish for bait, or you can use flies or lures or whatever you want. And there are numerous waters where you can do that. Anyhow, I'll make a motion to strike the artificial fly to strike the strike of the artificial fly antler only as to Barney and Manning Meadow within the recommendation. I hope that makes sense. The language in, as I read it, is to strike artificial flies antler only.
And how about I turn that around and say you're making a motion to keep the regulations at Barney and Manning as they are.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I was just trying to, and that makes sense, except I didn't want to limit the trout, where it doesn't seem like anybody has an objection to the take for trout there. Does that make sense?
So to keep the fly and lure only restrictions in place at Manning and Barney.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the motion, to keep the fly and lure only regulations.
You think, given my profession, I could have made that a little clearer.
So just for clarification, is this accepting this is just a standalone motion? A standalone motion?
Craig has
Yeah.
hand up again.
Well, and I motion, yeah, assuming nobody else has any other motions to modify the recommendation.
We haven't dealt with Flaming Gorge, let's see if there's a motion there.
All right, go ahead, Craig.
Chad, if I heard you correctly, you would keep the proposed 4-fish limit, but reinstate or keep the existing fly and lure only regulation.
Correct.
Okay.
Can you read that back? Okay.
Okay, so to capture all of that, so the motion is to keep the fly and lure only regulations in place for Manning and Barney reservoirs, but accept the proposal for increased limits at these reservoirs. Does that cover it, Chad?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Can we propose an amendment to that?
Well, let's get a second first, see if we have a second.
I'll second.
Okay,
Carlin's got a second.
no, you'd like to propose an amendment?
The only amendment to that I think could be entertained is to open Manning up to year-round flies and lures instead of having a seasonal closure.
Okay, so there's a couple of ways then, can I help you here?
Yeah, please.
Since you're good with this? So there's a couple of ways to handle that, Chad. If you and Berland are willing to just make that part of your motion, then we can just make it easy if you'd like to see that. If not, we will have a vote on the amendment and then see if the original motion gets amended or not.
No, I agree with Verlin on that. So,
You mean with Brian?
Brian, sorry, I couldn't see who was talking there, so I thought it was, yeah.
So, and remove the seasonal closure,
Comment, Chad?
Could I ask for the division's response on what that would do? That portion, that exposure, in talking with Mike, I think that's a really bad idea.
Mike,
Yeah.
I'd like to respond to that, so.
Yes, so there is a reason we specifically didn't propose opening out, removing the seasonal closure. And that is because specifically there are thousands of fish that congregate at the inlet in late May and into throughout June, right around our fish trap. And ultimately, opening up fishing during that time would be an ethical issue. It would be too easy for people to really get in there and target fish that are vulnerable, as well as potentially interfering with the trapping operations. So that's why we felt like the seasonal closure made sense to stay in place. Does that answer the question?
So with that clarification, does the motion stand?
Could you clarify exactly this seasonal closure, how long it is?
Yes, so it goes from, and this is a standard seasonal closure that covers covers kind of statewide if there are, it's mostly for cutthroat spawns that we're trying to protect. There are some places also that there are other spawns like rainbow trout that are being protected. It is a standard from January 1st through the second Saturday in July.
And when we're talking about matting, it's really probably not gonna matter a whole lot until mid-April, probably, when the ice comes off.
It's pretty much inaccessible through most of May even. And then
I'll withdraw it.
Okay, Chad, are you okay with removing that part of the motion?
Yes.
Based on Mike's response, and Verlin, are you still in line here? Do we have a motion that the RAC's comfortable with, those that made it?
Yeah, I'm good with it. I'm a little, can we do some discussion now?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'll tell you, I opened this letter up and I looked at this, and you can fish this species here, or you can shoot them with a spear here, you can do this. You know, kind of boggled my mind again. I thought I was looking at the hunting proclamation. I think it's so complicated, and, you know, and that's something kind of Gabe alluded to, are these guys that are breaking the law with the fishing, what they're fishing with, are they doing it out of spite, or are they doing it because out of ignorance? And I'm sure ignorance is what they'll claim, but I guess if you got it posted, that's should be good enough. But if you drive up to the lake and look at the sign instead of the lake, it's so complicated, all these different proclamations.
That's why you and I don't fish.
Boy, you and I-
Merlin, it's a little easier than hunting. All you have to do is get the proclamation, look at the body of water you're fishing, and it's right there. It's, you know, you don't have to figure out boundaries. It's just the body of water. It's simple.
Yeah, but you gotta buy a license.
I don't think not buying a license is on the table.
That's not acceptable.
It's for me.
Well, I appreciate the discussion. We do have a motion and a second. I will call for a vote at this
You want me to
time.
repeat where we're at? We've gone back and forth.
We're back to keeping it as it currently is. Took the dates off of it.
So
with the bag limits raised.
So to keep so right now we're keeping the closure.
Mm-hmm.
So to keep the flying lure only regulations in place, but accept a proposal for increased limits at Barney and Manning. So we'll just be silent on the closure, which is part of the proposal, so it would stay in place.
Yeah, that's where we are right now. So, all right, call for a vote. First, those in attendance here, all those for it. Those online. Unanimous.
I want to make a short comment on this. I think a lot of times we don't pay as much attention to the locals, and I think it's huge that you guys came and used your voice, and it's one thing to be a keyboard warrior and, you know, type in your responses, but it's another whole thing to spend your whole evening here talking about fish. So I think it was huge, and I really do appreciate your comments. We've had the battles before, like the bighorn sheep on our area, and the southern RAC was, you know, basically, well, we weren't unanimous when we voted on do not put the bighorn. The problem is you go to all the other RACs and your voice is not heard anywhere else. But I think where these specific areas are in our region, that should weigh more.
Thanks, Tim.
And I agree with you, but this meeting is great. But if you don't follow it up to the wildlife board, I think the decisions made in the Southern Utah RAC meeting should carry more weight in Southern Utah when the wildlife board talks about Southern Utah. And I hope it does, but I've seen it time and time again. If you don't make the trip to Salt Lake and say, do what you did here, this is a waste of time. That's my point of view.
Thank you for those comments.
So for those of you that are here, if you're interested, the board meeting will be September 19th in Farmington.
That's the other side of Salt Lake.
I just want to say one more thing to that, Riley. Don't only follow it up to the wildlife board, you guys. Take it to track. At least write a letter stating that you can't be there and let the other RACs know, because wildlife board will look at it. Does the majority of the RACs vote one way or not? So.
Thank you. We still need entertain a motion for the rest of this agenda. Item. That was only one little sliver of it.
So I'll make a motion that we accept the division of wildlife, the rest of the division of wildlife proposal, except for the ice.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have third. Does that make sense?
Yep. So we have a motion to accept the proposal as recommended, with the exception of the size of the ISO at Flaming Gorge. What are you laughing at, Tammy?
You don't wanna know.
She's laughing at ice hole sounds too similar to
Yes.
that. Let's just get it out.
Yeah.
Know how to catch a polar bear.
I knew that was coming. Yeah, all right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Those here, those online? Right, unanimous.
I've had little kids on the ice, so that scares the crap out of me thinking about how big an ice hole is.
All right, did you get all of that? All right. Thank you for the discussion and questions on that. We're ready to move on to our last agenda item, number 7, valuation of real property interest for purpose of acquisition, and we will.
Now the real fun begins
All
with
right.
property law, so get ready. No, thank you for having me, Chelsea Duke. I am the Wildlife Lands Coordinator out of the Salt Lake office. I hope everybody had a chance to review my presentation, but just a quick recap for you all. The majority of these changes are cosmetic, if you will. We're trying to restructure the rules so it makes more sense to our staff, and it more closely aligns the many state laws that are required by the division when we buy, sell, or exchange property. We've also added some safeguards in there for the division such as purpose statements of why and how we could go about acquiring and disposing of real property. Happy to answer any questions you might have for me.
All right. Tammy?
Question and a comment. So do you know that there's a huge push on legislative language changing the ability of the division to purchase property?
I was unaware of that.
So there's been some issues.
So that's specific to the use of conservation permits to purchase property.
Right.
Conservation permit.
Right. So is that gonna, it won't tie to this at all?
So we're talking about the funding mechanism for a purchase. yeah, this rule does not contemplate funding of purchasing land.
Okay, but there is also a whole lot of issues, and it's a political thing, and, you know, the elected
It
officials. so I'll speak.
usually is.
Yeah. But anyway, so politically, taking, private property or whatever off the tax roll, or, you know, for any of the counties are an issue in huge public lands, you know, and we're talking federal and state lands, in any of these public lands counties. So there's a huge push. The legislature's really looking at rewording a bunch of the statute on that.
So currently, there is a requirement, Chelsea can help me here, for us to, if we are contemplating purchasing land in a county, that we specifically go to that county commission and make sure we understand what their position is on it. And this doesn't change that, I don't.
No, it does not. So that is in state code, that when the division is contemplating purchasing private property, the division has to follow a very strict set of requirements, one of which is to go to the county council or commission where that property is held, and have that public comment, have that opportunity to discuss that with the commission. We also post in public newspapers, and we post on the, I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's where, yes, thank you, where all notices go. Yes, the notice website. And then after all of that is done, we submit that packet and all of that information through the Flipco office. And then that goes to Governor Cox, where we have to get a letter of support from Governor Cox in order to carry out that. So that code, as it stands right now, is in effect, and we do that for every acquisition we do from private. And I will just comment that we do try very hard to work with each county. We just had a purchase in Daggett County, where I know that's not in this region, but they have a resource management plan that is no net loss. And so we worked with the county to ensure that we were making sure that their goals were met along with our purchase goals. So we do try to work with
I know that the state RMP is also no net loss.
Correct.
And I think that's a lot of the issues, is maybe that has not.
We're a public land state, so removing any land out of private ownership shouldn't be done.
Well, the no net loss is specifically grazing. That's what it says, specifically grazing. And so that's a huge issue. It's come up way more. It's kind of one of those flaming issues right now politically. Okay, so specifically, what are the changes
to this rule specifically? So with this rule, the majority of this, no code is changing here. Specifically, we are pulling what was at one point one giant section of rule, and we're splitting it across into, this is the process for acquisition of land, this is the process for disposal, and then the third process for exchange. You must comply with both of them. So that's one of the main changes here. Some other changes is just changing language. So we had a lot of definitions that were in this rule that weren't cohesive with other things in Utah code. So we removed those definitions, and we are putting in the definitions from other sections of Utah code. So that was one of the big changes as well. And then some other changes is just language about, like I said, a purpose statement. So we said, when would we want to purchase land, and when would we want to dispose of land? So adding those things, and then just clarifying some of the exceptions to the appraisal requirements. We're required to pay fair market value or receive fair market value, but there are some exceptions to obtaining an appraisal, and so we just clarified those a little bit more. So mostly cosmetic changes.
So is this rule change, has it been approved through the Flipco office? Like, do they see this, do you know?
So it will have gone through RDCC or not, I don't know.
I don't believe our rule changes go through RDCC.
I wouldn't think so.
This is just a RAC and
Because
board
it's not
process,
a-
because it's just a.
Because it's not a code, it's just a rule. Well, some of our stuff is required, so it's required to go through RDCC.
Yeah. It's just like if Forest Service or BLM does rule change, they have to go through.
And we're not changing the process,
Right.
Tammy. We're
We're
not,
just clarifying.
it's just making it easier to follow.
I just know that the last couple of years, we found out that not everything jives with what the state resource management plan is.
I
And
think
so
this-
they've been doing a little more deeper dive on some of that. Maybe this is.
But this is bringing our rule more in line with code. And
Exactly. This rule is required by a different code. I'm required to have this rule. And so we're just clarifying that rule to make it easier to understand for our staff.
And everything that I saw that made sense to me. I mean, all of the clarifications, I was like, oh, of course you do it, you know, even the name. You know?
I try.
Yeah, even the name, I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense. Any other questions from the RAC?
Yeah, I've got a question. You just talked about, you're required to meet with the counties. How long has that rule of law been in effect? Is that, you have an idea? It's been how long? Is that something new or something?
So I've been in this program for 6 years, and it's always been a requirement for those 6 years. that I've
More
been.
than a decade, I don't remember,
I can go back and look at the code if you'd like. I can go pull that up.
it was 10 plus years and maybe more than 20. But I don't know if it's more than 20, but I know it's more than 10.
Okay.
Any questions from the public? Any more discussion from the RAC?
So Mike just chimed in, Mike Canning, he said it's been 30 years, so that's been on the books. 30 years.
Yeah, I have a comment. I went through this one was a lot easier for me to understand than the previous one with a lot of the stuff fishing, because the truth is I'm just not familiar with some bodies of water, and so that's my ignorance. But this one just makes sense. I like it. I am not that guy. I'm completely the opposite of adding more rules. I think less is more, but I do like clarification and simplification. I think you've done an outstanding job, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate clarifying the rules. I think a lot of times rule makers, whoever they are, get carried away with, and I'm like, and I don't want more rules, but I don't like the fact that DWR, state of Utah, can buy private land. Like Tammy said, it takes from the tax base of the county. Wayne County is a big county, but small in private property.
97%.
Yeah,
Public
it
property.
is. And like tomorrow I'll drive through Kingston Canyon. DWR owns all that. And I think I do quite a lot of vet work there, and there's only been 2 or 3 times I've ever seen anybody fishing on that severe river there. And the rest of it's tall grass and wasteland. And the county commissioners in Wayne County, DWR owns all that big in the bottoms. There's no grazing, and now they put in some little shanty houses there on the fish hatchery so that their employees don't have to go rent in the community. It's almost like the Capitol Reef Park where they've got housing down there. Those people that work at the park, you never see them. They don't communicate with the locals.
That might not be a bad thing.
Well, it's bad for us, but they would learn a lot if they would
We can educate.
communicate. And, we have at least a chance of teaching them. But the tax base, when the state of Utah buys this private land, these little counties take a bigger hit than the big counties. So it just sticks in my craw. I know we're not talking about that now. We're just doing some little rule adjustments, but DWR and the state of Utah shouldn't be buying private land, taking it out of the tax base.
That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Vernon. I'd entertain a motion from the RAC.
I'll motion to pass it as it is.
Have a motion to accept the proposal as presented. Do we have a second? And second. Those here in attendance, all in favor? Those online? Passes unanimously.
Not to interrupt, did you need to summarize online comments?
We didn't have any on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just.
Keeping me in check. All right.
It'll be back.
Appreciate all of those in attendance. Our next meeting will be November 12th. And that will be over in Cedar State. So at this point, we will adjourn our meeting. Thank you again for coming.